Arya stood before the gleaming silver mirror in her compact living quarters, her reflection a stark reminder of why her brilliant mind would never be enough. At 7 feet 8 inches tall, she was considered tragically undersized by Nexus standards. The irony wasn't lost on her. On most worlds, she would be considered a giant, but here among her own people, she was nothing more than a genetic disappointment. The soft blue glow of dawn filtered through her window, casting long shadows across the advanced laboratory equipment she'd modified to accommodate her diminutive stature. Today marked her 10th year as a quantum physicist, and her latest breakthrough in gravitational manipulation could revolutionize space travel. Yet, she knew the High Council would never accept her research. Not from someone like her. Specimen A-274, report to Medical Bay 7 for your scheduled enhancement evaluation, the building's AI announced, using her designation rather than her name. Arya's hands clenched into fists. The new Genetic Conformity Act required all undersized citizens to undergo mandatory height enhancement procedures. She had already rejected 3 appointments, but they were becoming more insistent. While preparing her lab for the day's experiments, Arya's attention was drawn to an alert on her holoscreen. A restricted file had been flagged by her search algorithm, one she had programmed to look for any information about worlds where people of her stature might exist. Her heart raced as she bypassed the security protocols, years of facing discrimination having taught her various ways to circumvent the system. The file contained survey data from a distant planet called Earth. As she read through the information, her eyes widened in disbelief. The average human height ranged from 5 to 6 feet, with those reaching her height being celebrated rather than ostracized. More importantly, their civilization had achieved remarkable progress despite their size, challenging everything her society believed about the correlation between height and capability. Your presence is unexpected, Specimen A-274, a deep voice resonated through the lab. Arya spun around to face Director Theron, his massive 14-foot frame filling the doorway. The medical bay reported your absence. I have critical experiments in progress, Director, Arya replied, subtly closing the Earth file on her screen. The gravitational manipulation results will be reassigned to a properly sized physicist, Theron interrupted. The Council has been quite patient with your reluctance. That ends today. Security will escort you to Medical Bay 7 tomorrow morning. This is not a request. After Theron left, Arya sat in silence, her mind racing. The Earth file had mentioned something else. Their atmosphere and gravity were compatible with Nexus physiology. She glanced at the small quantum drive containing her research data, then at the spaceport visible through her window. Years of discrimination had taught her to prepare for the worst. She had already modified a small research vessel, officially for testing her gravitational theories. Unofficially, it was her escape plan. That night, Arya moved through the shadows of the spaceport with practiced ease. Her small size, usually a source of shame, now proved advantageous as she slipped past security sensors calibrated for much larger beings. The research vessel waited in Bay 17, its systems already programmed with Earth's coordinates. As she initiated the launch sequence, alarms blared through the facility. Unauthorized launch detected in Bay 17. Security units responding. Arya's fingers flew across the controls, implementing override codes she had embedded months ago. The vessel rose smoothly, its experimental engines humming with power. Specimen A-274, power down immediately, Theron's voice commanded over the comm system. This act of defiance will not be tolerated. Arya switched off the comm and engaged her modified engines. The vessel shot forward with unprecedented speed, her gravitational manipulation technology working exactly as designed. Defense platforms began tracking her ship, but she had studied their patterns meticulously. A series of precise maneuvers took her through a gap in their coverage, and suddenly she was free, watching her homeworld shrink behind her. As the autopilot engaged for the long journey to Earth, Arya examined the small data crystal containing her research. Her new gravitational drive could change everything, but more importantly, she was finally free to be herself. Somewhere ahead lay a world where being different wasn't a crime, where her mind would matter more than her height. "Computer, estimated travel time to Earth?" she asked, settling into the pilot's seat. 3 months, 17 days at current velocity, the AI responded. Arya smiled, watching the stars streak past. "Then let's make them count." She began reviewing everything she knew about Earth, preparing for a world where, for the first time in her life, she might actually belong. As her ship hurtled through space, Arya felt a mix of fear and hope. She had left behind everything she knew, carrying only her research and her dreams of acceptance. The journey ahead was long and dangerous, but anything was better than being forced to change who she was. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, a small blue planet was waiting, one where she might finally be seen for who she was, not how tall she stood. Space was a lonelier place than Arya had imagined. 3 months into her journey to Earth, she sat in the cockpit of her small research vessel, watching distant stars blur past through the reinforced viewport. The ship's gentle hum had become her constant companion, along with the occasional alerts from her experimental gravitational drive. She spent her days analyzing Earth's data files, learning their languages, and studying their cultures. The more she learned, the more fascinated she became. These humans had achieved so much despite their size, or perhaps because of it. Their smaller stature had pushed them to innovate, to build tools and machines to overcome their limitations. They had split atoms, reached their moon, created art that moved souls to tears, all while being considered miniature by Nexus standards. A warning light flashed on her console, pulling her from her thoughts. The gravitational drive was showing signs of strain, something she had anticipated but hoped to avoid. "Computer, run diagnostic sequence Beta 7, she commanded, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls she had modified for her size. "Warning, gravitational field stability at 67% and declining," the computer responded. "Recommended action, reduce speed and initiate field realignment." Arya shook her head. "Negative. Maintain current velocity." She knew Nexus would have detected her trajectory by now. Slowing down wasn't an option, even if it meant pushing her experimental drive to its limits. She had designed it, after all. She knew exactly how far she could push it. As if summoned by her thoughts, the long-range sensors picked up a signal. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized the energy signature, a Nexus pursuit vessel. They had finally caught up with her. The massive ship would be crewed by properly sized citizens, no doubt sent to bring back the defective specimen who dared to flee. "Computer, activate stealth protocols," Arya commanded, her voice steady despite her fear. She had prepared for this, adding stealth capabilities to her ship that took advantage of her research into gravitational fields. The pursuing vessel wouldn't be looking for something so innovative, they always underestimated her. The next few hours were tense as Arya guided her ship through a series of complex maneuvers, using nearby stellar phenomena to mask her signature. Her small size had taught her to think creatively, to find solutions others might overlook. Finally, the pursuit vessel's signal faded. They had lost her. But the victory came at a cost. The gravitational drive was now showing serious signs of instability. Arya worked tirelessly to stabilize it, but she knew it was only a temporary fix. The drive would hold together long enough to reach Earth, it had to. As the days passed, Arya's anticipation grew. She had memorized everything about Earth's atmosphere, its gravity, its magnetic field. Her entry would need to be perfect. Too steep an angle and her compromised ship wouldn't survive. Too shallow and she'd bounce off the atmosphere into deep space. When the blue marble of Earth finally appeared in her viewport, Arya felt tears in her eyes. It was more beautiful than any image she had studied. But she had little time to admire the view. Her ship's systems were failing faster now, the gravitational drive pushing out surges of energy that made the whole vessel shudder. "Computer, begin entry sequence," she ordered, strapping herself into the pilot's seat. "Calculate optimal approach vector for minimum atmospheric stress." The entry began smoothly enough, but as soon as she hit the upper atmosphere, multiple systems began to fail. Warning lights flooded the cockpit as the gravitational drive finally gave out. Arya fought with the controls, trying to maintain a controllable descent even as her ship began to break apart around her. Through the flames of re-entry, she caught glimpses of the surface below, vast stretches of green and white. Scanners indicated she was over a region called Norway, its snow-covered forests rushing up to meet her. The ground proximity alarm screamed as Arya made one final attempt to level out her descent. The impact was violent but not fatal, thanks to her calculations and the ship's remaining emergency systems. Her vessel carved a long trench through the snowy forest before finally coming to rest in a clearing. As emergency sirens wailed and sparks flew from damaged systems, Arya checked herself for injuries. She was bruised but alive. Through the cracked viewport, she could see the sun rising over Earth's horizon, casting long shadows through the trees. The air that seeped through the damaged hull was crisp and clean. She had made it. But as she heard the sound of approaching vehicles, no doubt the local authorities coming to investigate the crash, a new fear gripped her. How would they react to her? Would they see her as a monster, too tall for their world just as she had been too small for hers? The sounds grew closer, vehicles and voices speaking in one of the languages she had learned. Norwegian. "Hello?" a voice called out in that language. "Is anyone alive in there?" Arya took a deep breath. This was the moment she had dreamed of and dreaded in equal measure. With trembling hands, she released her safety harness and moved toward the emergency hatch. Whatever happened next would define not just her future, but potentially the relationship between two worlds. The hatch opened with a hiss of hydraulics, and Earth's morning sunlight streamed into her ship. As Arya stepped out into the snow, she heard gasps from the gathered humans. But to her surprise, she saw no fear in their eyes, only wonder and amazement. A small team of rescue workers approached, their heads tilted back to look up at her. Their leader, a woman who barely reached Arya's waist, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome to Earth," she said in Norwegian, showing no sign of fear or prejudice. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical assistance?" For the first time in her life, Arya felt tears of joy rather than shame roll down her cheeks. She had found what she was looking for, a place where being different might just be the beginning of something wonderful. The Norwegian Institute of Science had never seen anything quite like Arya. 2 months after her crash landing, she stood before a gathering of Earth's leading scientists, her modified gravitational equations filling multiple holographic displays. The room was specially designed to accommodate her height, though at 7 feet 8 inches, she still had to duck through doorways occasionally. "The principle is elegant in its simplicity," she explained, gesturing to her equations. "Instead of fighting gravitational fields, we can manipulate them to create efficient propulsion systems." She demonstrated with a small device she had built using Earth materials, watching it float gently above her palm. The assembled scientists burst into excited discussion, their questions overlapping in multiple languages. Among the scientists was Dr. Viktor Petrov, a quantum physicist whose brilliant mind matched his gentle demeanor. Unlike her peers on Nexus, he never treated her as a curiosity or a defect. Instead, he challenged her theories, offered new perspectives, and most importantly, treated her as an equal. "Your work could revolutionize space travel," Victor said during one of their late-night research sessions. "But I'm more interested in how you developed these theories under such restrictive conditions." Arya smiled sadly, remembering her hidden laboratory on Nexus. Sometimes, limitations breed innovation. When you're told you can't do something because of who you are, you find creative ways to prove them wrong. Her integration into Earth society had been surprisingly smooth, though not without its amusing moments. She had learned to duck under doorframes, sit in specially reinforced chairs, and handle objects that seemed almost delicate in her hands. But what struck her most was how humans celebrated diversity. One afternoon, while walking through Oslo with Victor, they passed a basketball court where a game was in progress. The players, all tall by human standards, moved with grace and power. A group of children watched in awe, just as they often watched Arya. "See?" Victor said, noting her expression. "Here, being tall is often admired. But more importantly, we've learned that every physical characteristic brings its own advantages and challenges. It's how we use our differences that matters." The conversation was interrupted by an alert on Arya's communication device, another modification she'd made to Earth technology. The Norwegian government needed her expertise for an emergency. A fishing vessel had become trapped in rapidly forming ice near Svalbard, its crew in danger. Within hours, Arya found herself aboard a rescue helicopter, her gravitational manipulation device modified to help break up the ice. As they approached the stranded vessel, she could see the desperate situation. The ship was almost completely encased in ice, with freezing water threatening to overwhelm it. "I've never tested the device on this scale," she warned the rescue team. But as she activated it, the gravitational field began to work exactly as theorized. The ice cracked and shifted, creating a path for the fishing vessel to escape. The crew's cheers echoed across the Arctic waters. That evening, as she sat in her specially designed apartment overlooking Oslo's harbor, Arya reflected on how different her life had become. On Nexus, she had been forced to hide her achievements. Here, she was celebrated not despite her differences, but often because of them. Victor visited later, bringing with him something he called comfort food, hot chocolate and cinnamon rolls scaled up to her size by a local bakery that had become her favorite. "The rescue team sent this," he said, showing her videos of the grateful fishing crew reuniting with their families. "You're becoming quite the hero." Arya felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot chocolate. On Nexus, they would have focused on how my small size made the rescue more difficult. Here, people just care about helping each other. As they watched the sunset over Oslo's fjord, Victor hesitated before speaking. "The international space agencies want to collaborate on developing your gravitational drive technology. They're talking about establishing a new research center, with you as its director." Arya nearly spilled her hot chocolate. "Me? But I'm not even human. Surely they'd want one of your scientists in charge?" Victor laughed softly. "Earth has a long history of welcoming brilliant minds from other places. Besides, you've proven yourself not just as a scientist, but as someone who understands the importance of using technology to help others." Their conversation was interrupted by a strange reading on Arya's modified sensors. Something large had entered Earth's solar system, something using technology she recognized. Her hands began to tremble. "What is it?" Victor asked, noting her expression. "A Nexus ship," she whispered. "They've found me." As if to confirm her words, her communication device lit up with urgent messages from Earth space monitoring stations. A massive vessel had appeared near Jupiter's orbit, its size and technology unlike anything they had encountered before. Arya stood, moving to the window to look up at the darkening sky. She had known this day might come, but she had hoped for more time. Earth had become more than just a refuge, it had become home. These people, who had welcomed her and valued her despite her differences, had shown her what true acceptance meant. "What will you do?" Victor asked quietly, standing beside her. Arya squared her shoulders, her figure silhouetted against the evening sky. "What I should have done on Nexus, stand up for what's right. Earth protected me when I was vulnerable. Now it's my turn to protect Earth." As messages continued to pour in about the approaching Nexus vessel, Arya began preparing for what she knew would be the most challenging confrontation of her life. But this time, she wouldn't face it alone. This time, she had a whole world standing behind her. The Nexus diplomatic vessel hung in Earth's orbit like a gleaming silver sword, its massive form dwarfing the International Space Station nearby. Inside the United Nations Emergency Session in New York, Arya stood before representatives from every nation, her height for once not the most remarkable thing about her presence. They call themselves the Nexus Collective, she explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Their society is built on the belief that physical perfection, specifically height, correlates with intellectual and social superiority. The chamber filled with murmurs of disbelief and concern. Victor sat among the scientific advisors, his presence giving her strength. Over the past months, their collaboration had grown into something deeper, though neither had put it into words yet. Now, watching him take notes with his characteristic intensity, she felt a fierce need to protect this world that had given her so much. The chamber's screens flickered to life, displaying the face of High Chancellor Raiden, his 14-foot frame having to bend to fit in the transmission. "People of Earth," his deep voice resonated through the speakers, "we come seeking the return of our citizen, Specimen A-274. This undersized individual has stolen valuable technology and fled our society's enrichment protocols." Arya stepped forward, switching to the formal language of Nexus. "I am not Specimen A-274. My name is Arya, and I claimed asylum on Earth after your society attempted to force me into genetic modification against my will." The High Chancellor's expression darkened. "You see how the defect speaks? This is why our protocols exist. Earth has clearly corrupted her further." He turned his attention to the UN representatives. "We have observed your world. Your small stature makes you incapable of understanding the complexities of advanced civilization. Return our property, or we will be forced to demonstrate our technological superiority." The UN Secretary-General rose, her 5'4" frame straight with dignity. "Dr. Arya is not property. She is a valued member of our scientific community who has contributed greatly to Earth's development. We granted her asylum and recognize her right to self-determination." Suddenly, alarms blared through the chamber. On the screens, smaller Nexus vessels began deploying from the main ship, their weapon systems clearly visible. Earth's military forces went on high alert, but everyone knew their technology was no match for Nexus capabilities. "You have one Earth day to comply," Raiden announced before ending the transmission. The chamber erupted in chaos, but Arya's mind was already racing with possibilities. She had spent months studying Earth's history, particularly how smaller forces had overcome larger ones through strategy and innovation. More importantly, she had continued developing her gravitational manipulation technology. "I have a plan," she announced, silencing the chamber. "But I'll need Earth scientists and engineers to help me modify my gravitational drive technology into a defensive system." What followed was the most intense 20 hours of her life. In laboratories across the globe, humans worked tirelessly alongside her, adapting her technology in ways she had never imagined. Their creativity, born from centuries of overcoming physical limitations, proved invaluable. Victor coordinated the global effort, his brilliant mind helping to solve problems as they arose. During a rare quiet moment, he found her staring out at the Nexus ships through a laboratory window. "Why do they really want you back?" he asked softly. "It can't just be about the stolen technology." Arya smiled sadly. "I represent everything they fear, proof that their beliefs about size and worth are wrong. If others on Nexus learn that I've succeeded here, their whole social structure could collapse." As the deadline approached, Earth's hastily assembled defense system was ready for deployment. Arya had modified her original design to create a gravitational shield around the planet, one that could deflect Nexus weapons while allowing Earth vessels to pass through. The Nexus attack began precisely on schedule. Their ships launched energy weapons designed to disable Earth's primitive defenses. But when the beams hit Aria's gravitational shield, something unexpected happened. The shield not only deflected the attacks but redirected their energy to strengthen itself. Impossible, Raiden's voice boomed through the emergency channel. No undersized mind could create such technology. You're right, Arya responded, standing in Earth's Defense Command Center. I didn't create this alone. Earth's scientists helped me improve my original design. Their different perspectives, their creativity born from adapting to their size rather than trying to change it, that's what made this possible. The attack continued for hours, but the shield held. Nexus ships, designed for beings much larger than humans, proved less maneuverable than Earth's smaller vessels. When they attempted to breach the shield at its poles, they found themselves outmaneuvered by human pilots who had centuries of experience making the most of their agility. Finally, the attack ceased. The Nexus vessels regrouped, and Chancellor Raiden requested another audience. This time, his tone had changed. Perhaps, he said slowly, we have miscalculated. Your world's defense capabilities are impressive. Arya stepped forward again, but this time she wasn't afraid. What you see isn't just defense technology. It's proof that diversity breeds innovation. Earth has shown me that true advancement comes not from enforcing uniformity, but from embracing our differences. She took a deep breath before continuing. I propose an exchange, Earth's creativity and adaptability for Nexus's advanced technology. Let me serve as a bridge between our worlds, proving that size doesn't determine worth. As she waited for Raiden's response, Arya felt Victor's hand slip into hers. Whatever came next, she knew she was exactly where she belonged, on a world that had taught her that being different wasn't a flaw, but a gift. 1 year after the confrontation between Earth and Nexus, Arya stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Interstellar Cultural Exchange Center in Geneva. The massive structure had been built to accommodate beings of all sizes, with its soaring ceilings and adaptable spaces serving as a physical manifestation of the change she had helped create. Below her, humans and Nexus visitors mingled in the main hall. It had taken months of careful diplomacy, but the first cultural exchange program was finally underway. Young Nexus scientists who had never questioned their society's height-based hierarchy were learning alongside human researchers, discovering that brilliance came in all sizes. The latest data from the Mars Colony project just came in, Victor said, approaching with his tablet. Their relationship had deepened over the past year, proving that love, like intelligence, had nothing to do with physical dimensions. Your gravitational manipulation technology combined with human engineering has cut the travel time to Mars by 60%. Arya smiled, watching a group of human children leading a towering Nexus scholar through an exhibit about Earth's space program. The scholar had to bend nearly double to examine the displays, but his eyes showed genuine fascination rather than the condescension that would have been common a year ago. Chancellor Raiden's replacement is requesting another meeting, Victor continued, his hand finding hers. After the failed attempt to force Earth's submission, Nexus had undergone significant political changes. The old guard, so committed to their beliefs about physical superiority, had given way to more progressive leadership. Did they mention what it's about? Arya asked, though she had her suspicions. The past year had seen increasing unrest on Nexus as more of their undersized citizens learned about Earth's achievements. They want to discuss implementing anti-discrimination laws, Victor confirmed. Your success here has inspired a movement back on Nexus. People are questioning everything they were taught about the connection between size and ability. The observation deck's doors opened to admit Dr. Linnea Walsh, the human geneticist who had helped Arya understand why Nexus's obsession with height was not just socially wrong but scientifically flawed. The results from the comparative study are ready, she announced, her excitement evident despite her professional demeanor. We've proven that genetic diversity, including variations in height, actually strengthens a species' ability to adapt and innovate. As they discussed the findings, a commotion in the main hall drew their attention. A young Nexus scientist, barely 12 feet tall and considered runt by their standards, had just presented a revolutionary theory on quantum entanglement. The applause that filled the hall came from beings of all sizes, judging the work on its merits rather than its creator's physical dimensions. "They're calling it the Aria effect," Victor said softly. "The way your presence here has sparked change on both worlds." Aria felt tears welling in her eyes as she watched the scene below. "I never dreamed of this when I fled Nexus. I just wanted to find a place where I could exist without shame." "You did more than exist," Linnea added. "You showed both our worlds a better way forward." The day's biggest test came during the afternoon session, when the first group of Nexus parents arrived with their undersized children. These families had previously hidden their children away, ashamed of their failure to meet society's standards. Now they walked proudly into the exchange center, where their children would have the opportunity to learn alongside humans who would never judge them for their height. One small Nexus child, small by their standards though still nearly 7 feet tall, approached Aria with wide eyes. "Is it true?" she asked in careful English. "Did you really make ships fly with gravity?" Aria knelt down to the child's level, something that would have been unthinkable on Nexus a year ago. "Would you like to learn how?" The child's face lit up with joy untempered by shame. Later that evening, as Earth's sun set behind the Swiss Alps, Aria and Victor hosted a dinner that would have been impossible months ago. Around their table sat humans of various heights, Nexus scientists who had once looked down on anyone under 12 feet tall, and even a few representatives from other alien species who had been drawn to Earth's unique approach to diversity. "A toast," Victor proposed, raising his glass. "To differences that make us stronger." As glasses of all sizes clinked together, Aria felt a profound sense of peace. She looked around the table at faces that showed every variation in height and appearance, all engaged in animated discussion about science, art, and the future they could build together. A message flashed on her communication device, another group of undersized, Nexus citizens requesting asylum on Earth. But unlike her own desperate flight years ago, these requests now went through proper channels, with both governments working together to ensure safe passage and integration. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, noticing her contemplative expression. Aria gazed out at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. "About how running away from something can sometimes mean running towards something better. About how being rejected by one world led me to find acceptance not just on another world, but eventually on both." As if to emphasize her words, a Nexus ship descended gracefully through the atmosphere, its gravitational drive, based on her original design, allowing it to move with unprecedented efficiency. On board were more exchanges students, more researchers, more people ready to learn that diversity was not a weakness to be corrected but a strength to be celebrated. "We're receiving reports from 3 more worlds," Linnea announced, checking her tablet. "They want to join the exchange program. Your story has spread farther than we imagined." Aria smiled, remembering the frightened scientist who had fled her home world believing she was defective. That version of herself could never have imagined standing here, surrounded by friends and colleagues of all sizes, helping to forge connections between worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart. "So," Victor said with a grin, "ready to start working on that intergalactic cultural exchange center you proposed?" Aria laughed, squeezing his hand. "One step at a time. We still have so much to learn from each other right here." As night fell over Geneva, the exchange center's lights illuminated beings of all sizes walking together, sharing ideas, and building a future where no one would be judged by their physical dimensions but by the content of their character and the strength of their ideas. Aria had found more than acceptance, she had helped create a bridge between stars, proving that the greatest measurements were not those of height or size, but of the heart's capacity for understanding and the mind's ability to grow beyond the limitations others tried to impose.